when Em was 8 months old, she suddenly turned white. She lost her pinkness, she got clammy and cold, and she got quiet. She had been crying, and she got quiet.
You've talked about learning who you are. You've talked about loving your own self. You've talked about setting boundaries and community around you. And you've talked about speaking up for yourself. In a world where the challenges of caregiving can often overshadow personal growth, how do we find the space for love and personal development? My guest today has navigated through these challenges and has transformed them into a platform for advocacy and inspiration. Hello and welcome to She with Ade the One, where we share the extraordinary stories of ordinary women. I'm your host, Ade, and today we have a truly inspiring conversation lined up for you, filled with lessons on resilience, self-discovery, and the power of love amidst life's toughest challenges. As is usual with me, shall we start with a moment of gratitude? Today, I'm grateful for the opportunity to learn from other women's experiences which enlighten and inspire my own path. What are you grateful for today? Reflect on this as we prepare to dive into this profound conversation. Joining us today is Dr. Marcia Nathai-Balkissoon. She's a PhD holder in industrial engineering and a lecturer at the Department of Management Studies at the University of the West Indies, situated all the way in Trinidad and Tobago, where she teaches occupational safety, quality management, and business strategy courses. Marcia is not only an academic, but she's also an author, a coach, and the host of the Special Needs Parent podcast. Her book, Lighting the Path, Leaning into a Hopeful Future as a Special Needs Parent, provides invaluable insights for families facing similar challenges. Marcia, welcome to the show. It's an honor to have you here and to share your story and expertise.
Adi, thank you for having me here. It's such a pleasure. I feel inspired by the purpose of your podcast. I'm so grateful. Just to connect to what you were asking, I realize the gratitude I feel is to be among women who are changing the world through their lives and through their choices.
Of which you are undoubtedly a force to be reckoned with, Marcia. So I'd like to ask you, Marcia, before we go into the profound changes brought upon by your daughter's health challenges, could you tell us a little bit about what life was like before this happened?
Yes, before my daughter came into the picture, she was born in 2012. My life for 5 years earlier had been centered on my son. So I had been married for 12 years already. I had a very hands-on husband, and I never forget to be grateful about that. And a very heart-centered husband. And my little son, Brian, was full of energy. That energy never seemed to run out. I remember we had 2 dogs. One of them was a bigger dog, and he would hop on his back and ride him like a horse.
Oh my goodness, boys, eh?
And he loved those animals so much. But when he ran with those dogs, the dogs would stop running and pant, and he'd still have energy to go. So
Wow.
it took a lot, and it's been quite a challenge, but such a blessing and such a joy that I look back and I think, look how wonderful life is. Look how wonderful this plan is, because it's all sort of conspired to put me here with these people that I feel are the exact right people for me.
So, so life was full, you know. Brian was a healthy young man, full of life, and I understand even gifted and talented and full of energy. So, what happened next?
What happened next was that I had lost my father and I had also been laid off of my job. And my father was my big supporter. So the bottom had fallen out of my life and I didn't know how I would go forward. And I remember a lot of the time when my life gets hard, I go into this quiet place where I think I'm communing with God and I just listen. And a question came, and the question was, what would your dad want for you? And the answer was, he'd want you to be happy. He didn't want you to be a top engineer, a top manager, to drive a company car, to have an entertainment allowance, to do any of the posh things that the world sees as markers of success. All he would want for you is for you to be happy. And so I asked myself, Marsh, are you happy? Do you want to resume this engineering management career? And the answer was no. Through my work as an engineer, I made everybody else happy. My clients were always happy. My employers were always happy. I served everybody with everything I had. But when I got home, there was a big hole here. It was empty. And I realized I was doing it for everybody else. Ultimately, I realized I was doing it to make my mother proud. My mother needed a child who had certain credentials and status. And when I slowed myself down, I realized that I wasn't the person who needed that. And so life had conspired to give me the out. I had lost the job and I had lost the person whose opinion really mattered to me. And so I kept saying to myself, I am Daddy's legacy. And it's time for me to live by the values that we share. So I applied to work at the university. And I applied and applied and applied for several years. And finally, I got this job. Right as I got that job, we had said we want a sibling for Brian. And M came along immediately, almost as if I said, download M. What we did not know, though, is we had M. And when she was born, intuition said count fingers. And I got a sixth finger on one hand. I called my husband over and he said, Marsh, yes, there's a sixth finger, but he was crying and he said, a sixth finger often means that you have malformation of internal organ. So he went back to the doctors and he said, you all need to check Emma out, especially check her internal organs. And the next morning they came and they said, there's a problem with her heart. We're hearing a fairly loud murmur. We can't diagnose. Go find a pediatric cardiologist and get a proper diagnosis. That came at 18 days old, and she was diagnosed with tetralogy of Fallot for problems in her heart. Unfortunately, because this is a small tropical country, we were told that surgery could not be done. We didn't have the expertise to do that open heart surgery to correct the problem. And so we were told to sit and wait until she became critical. And when she became critical, we'd have to magically find a place to do open heart surgery in another country. That day came when M was 8 months old. She suddenly turned white. She lost her pinkness. She got clammy and cold. And she got quiet. She had been crying and she got quiet. The next day, the pediatric cardiologist told us we had reached the turning point. Emma's heart was no longer able to supply the oxygen she needed. to her body, and she was now at risk for stroke or seizure, and we needed to rush in a matter of days to get open heart surgery.
Dear. So how did those initial experiences with your daughter's health condition change your approach to life and work? You know, the early days, what were the most significant adjustments you had to make before you went on to have Emma seen to further?
Hindsight gives you 20/20 vision. And so I look back and I see that I just doubled down and worked harder, which may have not been the right thing to do, but it was what I did. I had so many other things that I needed to care for. I had so many people that depended on me. So I put my head down, got my shoulder to the block, and I pushed. I had a new job. I couldn't afford to lose it. That job income that was going to pay for the surgery and for the care after. And so I put everything into everything. I felt very tired, but I had been used to being tired because I was chronically a people pleaser. Happily, I think I've changed a lot.
Before you go any further, you were chronically a people pleaser. Let's talk about that for a wee while, shall we? What do you mean, people pleaser? And how did that manifest for you?
Okay. I'm going to try to keep it short. A people pleaser, because I did mention my mom already. I grew up always with my mom as my North Star. Her judgment was everything to me. I remember I would get 99 out of 100 in spelling. Or I would get really, really high marks in a whole report card on all the subjects. And you're talking about 16 subjects or something. But I remember my mom taking my report card to her siblings, one by one, not all together. So I went through this multiple times, standing there, having my mother every single time I came home at the end of the term. So this is what, 17 years multiplied by 3 times a year, I had this experience. This is Marcia's book, report book. I don't know why she did so bad. I don't know why she lost these marks here, and I don't know why she lost these marks here. Marcia, answer. And I would wish that the floor would open up and swallow me, because I felt like such a failure. I've only made sense of this in my adulthood. And so very, very quickly, I became an overachiever academically. Not because I liked overachieving, but because overachieving kept me safe. If I could come first, then I would less likely be berated. Less likely, not guaranteed, because I'd still gotten something wrong. But I learned to always aim to get everything right, to know it before, to study it before, to self-criticize. Because if I could use my inner critic to show me the potential potholes and get around them, then I wouldn't have somebody else showing me the pothole after and making me feel bad about it.
I get you. I get you. So how did this is your people-pleasing self. You've just had this horrible diagnosis on your daughter and you've got a new job. How did you manage to cope with all that?
I guess when you're in a certain limiting mindset, which is I have to be perfect, I have to be always on, my needs don't matter. Everybody else's needs come first. I said yes to everything every boss wanted. So in this new job, they were like, okay, so you're lecturing and you're developing new courses and new curricula and everything. But we have an audit coming up. Would you mind going through the audit report and helping us write the corrective action plan? Because your background is in quality. And I'm like, sure. In your heart of hearts, you want to say no, but oh gosh, I have to show them that I'm the right choice. They just chose me and they chose the right one. I want the security so much. I want to show my value so much. But it really boils down to I'm not convinced that I, simply as me, am worthy.
So how did this go on then? Because, according to the World Health Organization, caregivers, and you were combining this with full-time work and being a wife and a mother to your son, generally caregivers are significantly more likely to experience psychological distress than non-caregivers. So getting worse to the point where she needed an intervention and you wanting to make sure that you could afford that. And you've told us that you did it by working hard so that you could save up the money. So what I want to know is, well, first of all, what next steps you took, and then how did you come to yourself and recognize the need for self-care and to ensure your own well-being? Now, those are probably two different questions, and I think maybe we should probably approach them as that. So what came next in M's story? And then I'd like to ask you about how did you come to recognize that?
That's the right order to ask the questions because the straw that broke the camel's back was getting hurt. So I was clueless about all these things I'm telling you now. I just continued to push. Um, so what happened was that M was born. We thought we had a normal pregnancy. We thought all was well. M came to me and we discovered the 5 fingers that I expected to count were actually 6. And that led us to see that she had the problem with the heart. Took her to the open heart surgery. All went well. And that evening, before surgery, she had stood for the first time.
Oh, wow.
So we were really excited seeing this 8-month-old stand and try to bat at lights on an activity table. And we were like, yes, this is a sign that after this surgery, our little girl is going to be on a normal course. And we couldn't wait. We couldn't wait to have what we had had with her brother, running and playing and learning and reading and all of those. But it wasn't to be because M was recovering in the ICU. And she had a tube down her throat, which was a tube to provide her with oxygen from a ventilator machine. And the doctor said that night, she's breathing above the ventilator. She no longer needs a ventilator to breathe for her. So at 10 p.m., he told the nurse he was going to extubate her, take her off the ventilator. Somehow, while he was doing that,
Very sorry, because I'm a doctor. I don't think we do such things in the middle of the night. You need full complement, don't you?
that's what my reflection says now. And the nurse did say, don't you want to wait till tomorrow? And he said, no, the earlier we do this, the better for the patient. So he did. And I remember right after he finished extubating her, Sean and I went back into the room and we saw this box at the foot of the bed that connected to the drain line to her heart filling up with blood. And so we called the nurse and we said, something is wrong. This drain line should be just dripping and it's filling up. And she said, yes, something is wrong. But by the time she said that, alarms went off and M flatlined and the little heart monitor just went beep. It was out of a horror movie. And they just told all the doctors from all the ICU beds, I think there were 30-something, to leave their patients and come to Emma's bed. People crowded around Emma's bed. They put us out. We sat on the cold tile floors and we just watched as they cracked open her chest, as the doctor put his hand in and we knew he was holding her heart, and as he started to pump. He was trying to get her little heart to restart. Brain injury tends to happen after 3 minutes. Emma's heart didn't restart and it was 20 minutes. And I remember just holding Sean's hand and saying, Sean, I don't know what else to do, so let's pray. But my prayer to God for months had been, dear Lord, help me to accept your will. And the words were there, like, Marsh, this is what you should say. And I said, God, I'm sorry, I can't say the words. Give me back my child. That's all I wanted, and it's all I said. And the machine started to show a heartbeat. I got my prayer answered. But the little girl who came back was not the little girl who had left. Em had lost all of her senses, and she had lost her ability to suck and swallow. And she came back seizing. They immediately took medication and suppressed her nervous system to kind of shut her brain down and stop the seizures. And the next morning, she was seizing again. And I heard them talking because I got really good at listening to things that they wouldn't tell us. And I heard them saying, she was already on the full dose for her weight. We're going to double the weight, the dose. This is the only way to stop the seizures. So you pack all these little things away because you're not even allowed to acknowledge that you've heard it. And you go forward. So I asked, so what do we expect? Because I have a child now who they've put on these cold mats and induced a coma in. So they were taking her into hypothermia and making her get so cold that her system would shut down. And I understood intuitively that the reason was so that inflammation wouldn't get so bad that became the life-threatening thing. Let's give her time to recover. They told us to expect when we asked that her organs would shut down. They didn't expect her to live. But 2 weeks later, her organs had not shut down. I had pumped my milk multiple times a day into bottles and frozen them for the 2 weeks that she was in that coma. And their freezer was full of my milk, by which time mine had dried up because the stress stopped me from producing. But I had enough milk, and they put a little tube, it was smaller than the charger cord tube, down her nose and into her stomach. And every day they would give her 5 milliliters, which is 1 teaspoon of my milk. That was all that my little one was given.
It's a very small amount of milk.
I am assuming that she also would have been on IV. I do remember she had the IV tap. So I know that an IV would give nutrients as well. But I think they wanted to see, can her stomach handle food? So she was getting 5 ml of my milk, but my little girl just sort of shrunk down. She lost the baby fat, disappeared, and she got so shrunken and tiny. And when we got to about 2 weeks, they finally agreed to do an MRI. Let's look at her brain. That MRI should have shown her brain as gray. The doctors said it showed her entire brain as white. And they later told us that that meant that her whole brain had been wiped out. And that led to their diagnosis, which they told Sean all alone in a room when I had taken Bri downstairs to play. Bri was 5. I still had, next to this child who was comatose, I still had to pretend that life was grand. I still had to sing and dance and do all the things. I was doing that with him and giving him coloring to do or giving him a book to read. And when he was distracted, then I could talk with Sean about the next challenge that we had, which was how do we help him survive? So we got the diagnosis as much as we got. It was just something like, my husband couldn't remember the exact words. He said he thought that they either said she was severely brain injured or significantly brain injured. But what it boiled down to is they thought that she was vegetative for life. They did not see that there was any hope for her. And so the actual advice I got was to withhold food from my child and let her go. Those things never came into me as something I should sit and think about, nor to Sean, thankfully. So we didn't have a butting of heads or different opinions. We always were, both of us, on the same track. So we didn't listen. We didn't starve our child. We didn't decide that it was best for her to go. We didn't convince ourselves that it was for her sake. And then they said, well, if you're not listening to us, we advise you to put her in a home and move on with your life. Because she will not be able to do anything. And one doctor said she's just going to be a log in a bed. But again, it didn't ring true. It's a reason that eventually, 7 years on, I would write a book called Lighting the Path. Because these circumstances make you feel so isolated. When we made it back home, our family and friends did not visit and did not call. And we have huge families. I was very upset and I felt unloved, but more than that, remember, I already thought I was unworthy. Didn't know that these are the things I felt. But I didn't only feel unloved, I felt unlovable. I felt it was evidence that I was not somebody who deserved support. And so I would hide in my room at 2 and 3 in the morning and I would cry. Wouldn't tell my husband because he's carrying enough. I can't dump on him anymore. So I pretend like I'm strong. I sing and dance and read and do everything with my son. And I'm chipper and positive and I always have a new intervention with them. And I touch her with love and that is genuine. But I never let my face crack. I never let my heart bleed because I have to be strong in order to get through this thing. My husband is crying. The both of us can't cry. So I let him cry and I pretend to be the strong one. I meet the doctors before they go to the room and I say, tell me the news today. Before you tell grandma, because my mom was there, and before you tell Sean, tell me. And then I'm going to coach you all with how to break this news to them. Because grandma is down the corridor crying in a corner and Sean is behind the monitor crying. What else do you do? And then I'm an engineer. So logic is my saving grace. So I switch into survival mode and I turn on the logical self. And I turn off heart. Because my heart will make me collapse. I feel really deeply. I'm extremely empathetic. And that's a weakness for me at this point.
So how long she was home now?
She
Or she
stayed
was
in the US where we did surgery. She went there mid-November and we got back home second week in January. Being in a rehab in the States, we got them to take us for a few weeks into rehab. because I needed to learn from therapists who knew what to do for a child this hurt. I don't think another child this hurt has ever survived in my country. So would the therapist here have experience? The logic told me no. We learned from therapists, we asked all the questions, we learned what to do. And then we came home with our girl. She was 2 months shy of her first birthday.
So you just switched into doing mode and survival mode, and because you had all these things to do. When did you come to recognize then in this journey? I mean, what was the turning point for you in terms of learning? You already loved your daughter anyway, without question, clearly, and your son and your husband. But what about Marcia? How did you come to recognize the need to look after yourself? Because, listening to your story, I'm thinking she's going to break down at some point. This can't continue the way it was.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious, what happened?
I was concerned about a breakdown in my son. The first thing, because I knew this was stressful. I also knew that the kind of attention and care he used to get, he got none of it anymore. 95% of our time was spent on keeping him alive. She had gotten a chemical burn on top of everything else, and we won't even talk about this story. But I was caring for her around the feeding tube we had to have surgery to put in. She'd gotten burned there, and so every 2 hours I had to feed her with a syringe into that. I had to clean that site and bandage it and care for her. I had to manage her crying. I had to manage bleeding and other things. And Brian was seeing this. And if it was traumatizing to me, how traumatizing must that all have been? Plus losing mom and dad when you're 5. So I was so worried about that. But this little boy went to school after having missed like 2 months of school. And he brought back a report book that showed 100 out of 100 in every subject.
Ooh.
And
Wow.
at that point, I said to myself, I'm so relieved. It was a symptom of something that would come back to haunt us. But it took a few years. So about 2 years later, the crushing pressure that Bry put on himself to not be a bother to mommy and daddy because he saw how much mommy and daddy had to navigate. My 5-year-old told a counselor that we took him to at age 7. The only way he was going to talk to her is if she would tell nobody. She wasn't allowed to tell mom and dad what he said. And what he said was, I've been taking care of them and I can't have any problems in school because they can't worry about me. And it broke my heart when I realized that my son thought he had to kind of make himself invisible because he was too much more that we had to carry. So I started at that point to have dates with my son. I wasn't just getting him to school, putting food in front of him and so on. I needed to show him that he was valued, that he made my heart dance. And so I said, we're going to go to the movies together. And we made a tradition from the time he was about 8. Every single year, there was a Christmas concert at Queen's Hall, which is the grandest hall here. And it was very expensive for me, but I got the VIP ticket. And I took this child, and the 2 of us would dress up. And I didn't feel like dressing up, but I would dress up. And he and I would go to this concert, and we'd dance in our seats as the choir sang the Christmas songs. And it was phenomenal. And every year, this was our thing. I think he came a long way because he was important and he felt it. I healed a lot there too.
Because my next question was, I hear Brian, but I don't hear what I hear still is Marcia still doing for everybody.
Still digging that hole. Yeah.
So what happened with Marcia? And at
Yeah.
what
So
point,
what happened with me is I had to life first pushes you with one finger. You don't learn the lesson, life punches you. You don't learn the lesson, life kicks your knees out from under you and you fall. You don't learn the lesson, life drops a boulder off a cliff on top.
I don't want to get to that point.
I had to get to that point because what happened with M was a boulder off the cliff for us. Life really hit rock bottom for us. And I still continue to try to be this superwoman. And it was like automatic. I had trained myself to never see my needs. I thought that was selfish. So many of us do. We are taught in our cultures that the woman sees to all others, but the woman is silent and unseen. Yeah? And I think this was happening to say, no, none of that anymore. And it's fine if anybody else judges you, but the only judgment that matters is yours. So start retraining yourself. That started to come when I would sit at 2:00 in the morning and cry in the dark, stifling the cries under the pillow so nobody would hear. And I would pray to God and say, dear God, please don't wake me up in the morning. I feel like I'm failing at life. I feel like I'm adding no value to M or to anybody else. And Lord, if you could please just finish this thing here, because I think my family will be better off without me. I'll get
Aren't
some.
they just the lies that
Yeah,
your head tells you when you're depressed?
of course. And I
So,
didn't know I was depressed. But
no.
here's where the change came. And this is the most important thing. The change came one morning because I woke up every day feeling like I was stepping into the same day replaying every day. Right? My child was still hurt. I had debilitating back pain. And I still would have to lift this child and bathe this child. And sometimes my back would hurt so much, my legs would give out and I'd drop. And one day, Sean went to work and I was alone with them. And this backstabbing pain started. But I had to feed her and I had to bathe her and I had to do everything. And I'm dragging my feet and forcing myself through the pain to keep doing everything because Em matters. She does. And I sit next to her on the bed after I give her the bath and tote her back. And I start to cry in front of her. And I'm crying and crying, and Em can't see, but she started to hear now, and she hears mommy crying. And Em starts to laugh. Because I assume my crying is this big open mouth thing. Oh, it sounds like laughter. And I'm screaming this cry, and this child is laughing more. And I'm crying more and more and more. And I realize I just can't bear this anymore. And I'm afraid to say to the world how bereft I am, how broken I am, how I feel trapped in this life. Because I knew that the minute I said this, people would say, you're not a good parent. You're not a good mother. You're a failure as a mother. You don't love your disabled child. Because if you love your disabled child, oh, you'd be floating from task to task and you'd be so happy to serve her. Yeah? I needed to reach that place where I saw the dichotomy of the two things. That I had the lowest low happening and the highest high happening in the same day. that I was numbing myself from feeling either one so I could be safe in the middle. And that meant that I was not truly living life. My fear of feeling how horrible the lows felt led me to numb myself and not really experience my life. And somehow I needed to understand that and get to a point where I wanted to change that. So one morning I woke up. It was dawn, the sun was just coming up. The birds were singing outside. I have a frangipani tree outside my window, and a bird often makes a nest there. And they were singing away, but my eyes opened, and I couldn't hear the joyful sounds. I couldn't see the beauty of the sun coming up. All I was going to do was pull on the cloak of despair and gloom and trudge into the same old day that I was trapped in. And then Emma's laughter weaves through my house. And that laugh wrapped around me and it squeezed. And for the first time in 7 years, I was in a place where I could learn from that. It had happened so many times before, and I'd been blind and deaf to it. But today was the day that change had come. And so I sat back down, cloak not on yet. And I said, Marsh, what have you lost? Because you're mourning all this loss. What have you lost? Because the person who lost everything is in the next room. And what's she doing? She's laughing so joyfully and saying, thank you, God, for this wonderful day. Thank you for the opportunity to be me and show up as me. I am enough just as I am. And I'm going to do exactly what I'm able to do and meant to do. I don't need to change. And all of a sudden, I knew this was the lesson that this child wordlessly had been teaching me, patiently had been teaching me for years, and just waiting for mom to be ready to receive. And I received that message that day, and suddenly a page turned in my life. I was ready because there's a new chapter. The new chapter was, she's enough. I know she's enough, but I hadn't known it the day before. The day before, I'd listened to all the therapists tell me she's not meeting these developmental stages. All the doctors tell me she'll never recover. Statistically, it's impossible. All the rules tell me a child is only worthy if it can be educated, if it can be certified, if it can grow up and get a meaningful job and earn an income. Because you see, without that, your child is a drain on society and the economy. Those are the things that I'm still told. What nonsense. Finally, I understood. And I spent the next couple of years really digging into, well, what does this mean? What do you understand? Who are you? I needed to learn to love me and accept me. And that meant I needed to see my flaws and my brokenness and my reasons for people to see me as not enough. And I needed to say, yeah, I see those sides of you as well as the bright sides. And I love them all.
Are there specific resources or things that you did to help you in that process of seeing yourself and accepting yourself and coming to the point where you cared for yourself and realized that you were enough and worthy of love just as you are, as you had been able to say for Emma, because again, I get the sense that it's easy to feel
To
it
love,
for Emma, but
easy to love him.
how did Marcia get to that point, if that makes any sense?
Yeah, it's easy to love and to be connected with, to feel connection with somebody who's laughing and joyful. You've seen me enough to know that I'm not outwardly a flittery person. I'm not, I'm a very, very loving person. But you have to get to know me to see that about me. So I won't wear the flashy makeup and the flashy clothes. And therefore, I'm not so easy to love from the brightness outside. These are the things I did. I didn't know what I felt. Let's start there.
Yes.
We must know how we feel and accept how we feel to move forward. I didn't know how I felt, and I didn't diagnose that. I didn't have money to send myself to counseling. I didn't have time. I had to sit at a bedside. I wasn't a priority. And I couldn't take money from my child to send myself to get her. But I did start writing in a journal. Intuition guided. I didn't know what to do. I took a book one day and I just wrote whatever came. I asked myself, what do I feel today? I let myself talk about how trapped and how angry and how all those other things. And now I describe it as I write to know how I feel. I write to discover who I am. And when I reread what I've written, I'm like, really? it's so amazing to
Wow.
discover certain depths that I guess I wasn't brave enough to say it to somebody else, but I can say it to myself because it's my eyes only. Lately, when I have tough times, so you could be however much healed, life continues lifing, and hard times come. So I still continue grabbing a paper and writing. And sometimes you just need to write all the rubbish out. You need to write all the hate and the hurt and the everything out. And you cannot tell yourself that this is not part of you. Only last year, I came across something I was reading and the word rage came up. And I remember saying, but I don't feel any rage.
But you did.
I was still hiding that part from myself. So much healing had happened. And I've supported so many people. But there are still nuances of me that are still to be peeled back. And those come naturally. It's like an onion. I cannot uncover the most painful roots until I heal some of the outer layers, until I get stronger there, and then I could look at the next layer. It's a process. So last year I wrote about how angry I was and how much rage I felt. How dare you abandon me? How dare you, not even validate that I exist, but go sit with your family, my own family, sit with them and talk about our lives, but never have the guts to talk to me about it? How dare you use our situation as fodder to prove to yourself that you are caring? So some really heavy stuff came out, and it's
So
valid.
writing allowed you to let go of the external pressures and judgments. Was there any other thing that helped you? Did you speak to your family at all?
So I tried. Mom is going to come up, and whatever I say is not to mean that my mom is not also a loving person. There are two sides to all of us. And the hard journey I've been on means that I've seen some hard stuff in my relationship. So the one that hurts me the most is the person that means the most to me. and that's Mom. I have sought my mother's approval, acceptance, and love overtly. I've contorted myself since I was 2 to try to earn that. And I remember. And I remember my mom said to me once in the car, so how are you going? I picked her up to take her somewhere she had asked me to take her. And she said, so how are you going? And I said, well, Mom, I'm having a hard time. And she cut me off in the middle of the first sentence. And she said, well, girl, God don't give you what you can't handle. Let's leave it there. Let's leave it there. So she put a point final on that. And she let me know, I'm not interested in you telling me. I think I cried a lot that night. I pretended to be tough and handle it. But I cried. I wanted my mommy to hug me up. That's
It's
normal.
often the closest people to us that can be the most insensitive, and they're not probably not meaning it that way, but
No.
they're not thinking about you in a way that validates and gives you support. So I think my next question, well, it's kind of two questions. Do you have any advice to someone who might be listening, feeling a similar overwhelm of societal expectations? And
Yeah.
how can people who are caregivers find and build supportive communities where you can find someone who understands what you're going through, at least, because often that is not within your own family, or
Yeah.
your natural family, shall I
So
say.
I did 2 other things. And so I think it was 2019, I started to download into myself poetry. Things started to just write themselves, and it was poems coming out. And I would write these poems on the spot, and it was from my heart. And immediately I'd drop it onto Facebook, no editing. And I'd say, this is what I'm feeling right now in this moment. Oops, out. Stranger things started to happen. People started to say, how do you know I feel this hurt about these things? I'm going to try that thing that you write about, etc. And I remember feeling so surprised because really I was just putting it out because it was like a spring cleaning of me was happening. And I was saying, here it is, world. Here is me. I'm showing me. That was the reason I wrote it. But now validation was coming. And it became, here is who we are. Here is the human condition. And it started to be, I give people a safe space to be themselves. We don't have to only post when we go to Paris or when we dress up for the new year. We don't have to post with a full face of makeup. You just get to show up with your mussed and bruised self. And you know what? That's going to be more meaningful for people because it's the one that continues to walk beside them. So that was a big step for me. And it also is a big step for the people that I help when I do coaching. Just helping them to uncover, where are your bruises? What's the root of some of that? How do we start healing these things? And so often it's not a big, hard job. It's a little step. But it's such a meaningful step, this self-love and self-acceptance. I don't need them to love and accept me. I need me to love and accept me. So that's a big one. And the second big one for me is handle your circle and your boundaries. And I think the two are very closely intertwined, your circle and your boundaries. So for Mom, for example, the first time she visited my home after M was about 2 years in. She walked in one day and she screwed up her face because I was giving 100% of me time, and so my house didn't look like Home and Garden magazine. It looked like the antithesis of Home and Garden magazine. And Mom just wrinkled her nose and she looked around and her eyebrows went up. And then she walked over to my TV stand and she put her finger out and she wiped.
What? Oh dear.
Yeah. So I got all the nonverbals. Then she said to me, Marcia, you can't put a few plants in your front yard and make this place look better? And I remember feeling so angry and so othered by my own mother. But I had made up my mind that this was the first visit and I was happy my mother was here to see my child. So I stayed quiet. And so she went in, saw him and so on. And then she came back out. And something else she must have said. And I said, Mom, do you realize that since you've come into this house, you have not said hello yet? You have not asked how I am yet? You've told me all the things I'm not doing well enough. And you've told me all the things I need to do better. She said, well, I went about it wrong. Okay, could we drop it? And duly chastised at 45, I went back into being a little girl who's quiet. And she turned her back. And I guess she was going to put the TV on or something. And intuition again said, stop. How old are you? Are you standing in your house? And I reached out and I tapped her on the shoulder and I said, actually, Mom, it's not all right. Have a seat. We're going to have a chat. 45 years old, and that was the first time I had the backbone to stand up for me. And Mom sat and I said, listen, I spend all of my time taking care of him. I sleep 2 hours a night. That's as much as I can do. This is the least important of my priorities. And this house is my safe space. When you cross this gate to come into my space, there are certain things that are allowed and certain things that are not allowed. And so if you cannot fit within those boundaries, you don't have to come here. But the moment you walk through my gate, I expect to feel safe in my space. I feel stressed telling you this even now because it's my mother, and culturally we are taught certain things. But I needed to, because first we should respect ourselves. And that was the first domino. And other dominoes started. How do I say no when my heart says no to the latest request at work? How do I demand that when I teach a class of 200 people and somebody else is teaching a class of 6 people, that I get some help with marking papers? We both are paid the same. I am inundated. How do I say to the professor who comes and tells me, you need to pretend you have a normal life and you don't have a special needs child? I got that from my head once. He said, show up to class as if your life is just like everybody else. Do not talk about what's going on with your daughter. It was the absolute wrong advice. But again, everybody likes not being stressed, not seeing the uncomfortable. And I needed to get these things from people so that I could understand the reality of what we special needs parents face. And I could decide, no, I reject this. What is the alternate reality that I choose? And how am I going to be a part of creating it? And that's why I became a special needs parent coach. That's why I wrote Lighting the Path. That's why I run the special needs parent space on Facebook. There is a place where we belong. There is a place where people understand. There is a place where you could talk about joy and love for your child and feeling trapped and resentful, because they are all your experience.
And when we're not to sort of ignore your experience in any way,
We
really.
cannot invalidate a part of our reality.
Mm, mm. Wow, you've done really well contributing to a community that making a community a safe place for people in similar situations. I mean, the UN talks about caring being largely done by women. It's been like that since day dot, I suppose. But you know, the domestic impact, the impact of that is about what, $10 trillion a year. And reflecting on that, what practical lessons do you think you can share that might help? You've talked about learning who you are, you've talked about loving your own self, you've talked about setting boundaries and community around you, and you've talked about speaking up for yourself and not trying to be make light of the situation. So, I mean, what strategies have you found as being most effective for balancing caregiving with personal needs and your professional obligations? And how can societal perceptions be transformed to better ways of thinking, better ways of supporting caregivers, both financially and otherwise, or emotionally,
So,
any which way? What do you think?
so many answers are coming through my head. I'm going to just say whichever one to remember. One is communication.
Mm-hmm.
Stop staying in silence.
Don't stay silent.
Ask for help. I
Ask for
think that
help.
was the hardest one for me, asking for help, because I so feared getting a no. So that's one. Ask. Dare to ask. See, the worst response you could get is the same as if you didn't ask, which is no. You stay in your same situation. The best response is sure, and can I also? You might even get more than you asked. Ade, remind me of the whole question, please.
So the whole question was, how can people balance caregiving with personal obligations, professional obligations? And then
So,
a B side. Well, let's do that first because there's
okay.
another two.
The other one is learn to press pause. I am the kind of person who, when my mind is overloaded, I feel so overwhelmed. Or I pressing pause on your runaway mind and your worries and your anxiety so that you could just center and say, okay, what
B.
do you really want? So tune in by pressing pause. Listen. Know what you're really called to do or what you're being influenced to do. Big one for me, and you know this already, is when you don't know what else to do, and also when amazing things are happening. Press pause and pray. Both of those things have saved me so many times. And now Emma squeals in laughter when mommy starts the prayer because this is normal. And that lights this fire in her and in me because this day is a gift. And it reminds me, hey Marsh, do you have an audacious vision for your life? That's the next tool, the next thing. It's so easy to feel beaten down and to say, all my dreams got crushed and scattered to the winds. And I can't dream anymore because life gives me no space to dream. Yeah, on the surface, my life gives me no space. How could this be possible to have a dream? Life gives us as much space as we choose to see.
It's profound.
I came back alive when I heard Emmy's laugh, and I knew I was enough because my girl has all the reasons to say she can't, she's lost, she's insignificant. Lots of people have told me that she's insignificant and that she's just a body lying there. But she's not. And all you need to do is go to my Facebook page. I put up videos of us. You hear Emma's laugh once and you know what a light that child is in this life. This journey has opened up my life. On Saturday, I went and I spoke on a stage to 100, 150 special needs parents and their family. And those people's eyes filled up with tears. And maybe it was my story, but it wasn't. It was that they felt seen through my story. They felt loved and valued through my story. And they saw a vista of what life could be for them. So don't wait for me to tell you my story. Start realizing what your vision is. There's a purpose written on your heart. Start tapping into what it is. Get into that quiet space when you press pause. And you don't have to have the whole 100-page vision done. You don't have to have a very, very pretty and sparkly vision board. Eventually you might get there. All you need is to ask yourself, what's one thing that I used to love doing, and my heart is asking me to give time to again? Let me explain. So, because excuses come up, people say yes, but. And I've learned to reword it and say yes, and. Yes, I used to spend a night. I would start at 6 p.m. and the sun would come up the next morning and I used to be doing my art. And yes, but got in the way for too long. Yes, but I have other priorities. Yes, but how do you do that with 2 children? Take a night off. And then I said, yes, and I'm going to find a way to do it. And the way I found was I started to make bookmarks. I only have 5 minutes, or I can't go into a studio because I'm next to Emma on the bed. But I can sit next to Emma on the bed and draw on a piece of card that's as big as a bookmark. And my sister told me she doesn't consider that to be art. But that's fine. Your judgment is yours. That's also a tool. Let people have their opinions. Understand that their opinion is none of your business. The only opinion you need is yours. And so I've done bookmarks and given them as gifts all over the world. I've done bookmarks and seen that my son comes and says he gets to choose first. He has a collection of my bookmarks in his room because he loves to read. And he puts a different bookmark in each book. And it makes my heart sing that my son loves the things I make. But most of all, I love the things I make, and they don't turn out nice. So I express my creative side. Find fun things to do in your life. And they don't have to make sense, and you don't have to be great at them to have fun with them. So for me, I make up songs next to him, and we sing them at the top of our lungs, and sometimes the singing is good and sometimes the singing isn't. But every time it's good for our heart. So we sing, we dance, we read. We make up stories. That's so important. I think those may be the main things.
Wow. Thank you, Marcia. I have thoroughly enjoyed listening to you and your story, which is obviously very emotional, but the joy of it is seeing how you have found joy within the circumstance, and how Emma's condition, though not desired of you, has still brought you to a place where you have joy, to a place where you've written a book that helps other people, to a place where you provided other people with a community and a space where they can freely share and experience support, and for this place where you speak to other people and you really enjoy your daughter. And it sounds to me like you've learned much more through this whole experience and gained a whole nother family, in quote, even, than say if you had had, and I don't say it lightly, but than if you had had a child who did not have M's challenges. And honestly, it has moved me considerably. And the things that you have shared to that have helped you have been things that I have said and say often to people that are in my community. But to hear it with your story just makes them even more impactful for me. So I really want to thank you for giving up the time, especially knowing that your life is this full and you've got all these things to do, to spend this time with me talking about your story and hopefully helping somebody out there who is in a similar situation, or even can relate to little bits of your story, where I certainly could relate with the depression bit because I've been through that.
Yeah.
So, like I say, I'm just very mightily honored and really grateful. And we wish Emma and Brian well going forward. And I hope that this will not be the end of our collab in some way or the other.
Ade, I do want to say one more thing that I forgot.
Yes, please do.
Um, Saying thanks is such a major thing for me. And saying thanks comes in a few ways, but thank you to the people who did show up. I wasn't all alone. It may have sounded so because of the things I was talking about. But one, I need to acknowledge my husband. My husband has been extremely present at every stage and in every way. And I recognize that that's not always the case in a parenting situation. Um, but he is the heart and I am the head, I think, in terms of logic versus heart. Um, which is not to say that we both don't bring both, but he's so much more the heart, and I'm so much more. Let me plan it. Let me logic it out, right? Let me come up with a new intervention. But what he is, he's the person that chooses to feed her if she has a choice. She'll make do with mommy, but daddy makes her happy when he's feeding her, and he does it regularly. He's the one she wants to give her a bath. He is the one she wants for the nurturing things. And that in our culture felt like I was failing.
A bit weird, yes.
Yes, and I had to understand, hey, who made these rules anyway? It needs to happen the way that it's right for us. Yeah. Um, so we do what feels right. M says dada. She's non-verbal, but she says dada. She doesn't say mama. There was one time I heard mama. I was with them trying to put her to sleep one night. And I kept not talking and saying, time to sleep kind of thing. And eventually, after 2 hours, I heard mama. And I couldn't help. And I said, yes, baby. I broke the silence. Da-da! And I couldn't help but laugh. She was so longing for this dada that she figured out how to say mama just to say, not you.
Just get your attention. Get
You.
my dad, please.
And her dad came and she went to sleep 10 minutes later.
Oh, bless.
So part of saying thank you is Thank you to the people who show up for us. Thank you to people who we take for granted in our life. They're always there, so they become unseen. No. Thank you also. My aunt, Auntie Grace, she passed in December. She was 80. And she was the one person who showed up every Sunday and helped my daughter and talked to my husband and talked to Brian. She loved my family. She is beloved by me. And she will never be forgotten. So I celebrate it. And the last thing is thanking things. Saying thanks also includes celebrating. Don't forget to pause and celebrate how far you've come. And sometimes how far you've come to somebody else looks like a millimeter, but is worthy of celebration.
Absolutely. It's progress.
So don't compare where anybody else has reached. Don't compare how shiny their life looks. Don't compare how they look, because somebody could look really good and you say, oh, she does really good self-care. If you go on that standard, I don't do really good self-care. But the things that matter to me and refill me are not the things that might refill somebody else.
Absolutely.
So find it out, but look at where you started. Recognize how far you've come. And then pause long enough to celebrate. And celebrating could be something as simple as writing a message to yourself in a journal. Celebrating could be as simple as saying a prayer, dear Lord, thank you for bringing me to this place. How amazing is it that I've gotten here? Celebrating could be, as my husband has done to force me to celebrate. Wrap your arms around the person that you want to celebrate with and jump until you're laughing like a crazy person and feel how much joy there is in that person for you and in the moment. That celebration. And of course, you can do the usual things like buy something for yourself, go out and celebrate. But if you're in a situation where there's little time, little energy, I just gave you a couple of things that let you celebrate anyway and remember.
Thank you, Marcia. If Marcia's story has moved you, I wonder if I could invite you to join our Sister Sync community where we uplift each other through shared experiences and support. Remember, we're also offering a giveaway of a chapter in Marcia's book for anybody who's navigating caregiving challenges. If you go to her website, she has a click on call for that. So in closing, again, I'm going to say, Marcia, thank you for sharing your journey with us. I will put the details of your book, your website on the show notes so that our viewers can find you and connect with you more. Your experience sheds so much light on the crucial need for recognition and support of caregivers everywhere. And if you know someone who's going through anything like what Marcia goes through, go say hello, go lend a hand. Just be quiet and let them talk to you if they need it. Give them a phone call. Use what maybe you've learned today to improve your life or support somebody who is a caregiver, you know? Please share your thoughts, subscribe to the podcast, and help spread this important message. And until next time, take care of yourself as passionately as you do others. You're worth it. Talk soon.